I'm Stephen John Drew from the official GonnaGeek.com show, a weekly geek news podcast that is a part of the Gonna Geek network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to episode 229 of Better Podcasting. On this show, we discuss podcast publishing delays.
In this week's Better Podcasting Download, we chat about that Stitcher sale rumor.
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we ask when the last time was you listened to an old podcast episode of yours.
Lauren, I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know when I listened to an old podcaster, it was SP.
Welcome to Better Podcasting. With a combined history of over 1,000 episodes, and starting as early as 2008, we are hobby podcasters through and through, just like you. That's why we are different. We minimize the money talk so that you can focus on building a better podcast. Here are the hosts for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen John Drew, and I am pleased to say SP is here again this week.
America! Happy Independence Day, everyone. I know it's after the fact as this gets released, but it's 4th of July, might as well celebrate it. So I got the duds, got the backdrop, and we're ready to roll.
I know it's getting really late now that it is the 12th of July that this is being released. But happy Canada Day. That's almost a half a month later, but I'll roll with it. Happy Canada Day.
Why not? I mean, when you release a show every 2 weeks, you got to take liberties on what's going on. Besides, I don't know if you've heard, but here in the United States, I know this is kind of getting into local news and timely news and stuff like that. But here in the United States, there have been fireworks going off since like March, like all through the night, in the middle of the night, and that sort of thing. So people have been celebrating. The problem is with the pandemic, you don't want to have fireworks to have everybody come together and gather in mass gatherings. So I saw something interesting in New York. There was Macy's actually signed up to do fireworks for all of New York, and they're doing it one borough at a time, but they're not saying where it is until right beforehand in order to not have people congregate. But it's a heck of a display. So yeah, people have been celebrating all summer long, and I think it will continue far after the 4th of July into August and September until kids go back to school, whenever that's going to be.
So before we get into the show, we always like to mention that we have another show that we do. It's called the Better Podcasting Live Chat. We don't always do that at the beginning, but today we're going to. It's called the Better Podcasting Live Chat. It's where we do a little live Q&A, and there was a little bit of a change with the schedule over the last couple of weeks because we did take a little bit of time off and whatnot. Or hint, if you're watching this live, we're about to take some time off. But what you can do is go to betterpodcasting.com and figure out all of that madness, because there is a little event section there that you can see, and you can go ahead and click into that to find the time and all that. And you just, anyways, you can have a look there, betterpodcasting.com, and you can see what the next Better Podcasting live recording is, and whether it will be this show, Better Podcasting Prime, or the Better Podcasting Live Chat. And hey, if you're not subscribed to that Better Podcasting Live Chat, we would love to have you subscribe to that, because we may have given a couple of little random thoughts, just a couple nuggets to do with what we're about to talk about in our download. Just a couple, just a little, but stay tuned for the Better Podcasting download, which will have all of our deep thoughts. SP, you had something you wanted to share.
Deep Thoughts by Jack Handley?
No, I sorry. I actually thought you were doing your how you saved your podcast story, but I apologize.
Oh, how I saved my podcast. No.
Blind toss.
Let's talk about this.
Okay,
how
so
I
go
saved
ahead.
my
Go ahead
podcast
then.
story.
So,
you're talking about the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode 337, right? Yeah. Okay.
SP, you had something you wanted to share.
I do. So this week was a nightmare with Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. number 337. Not the recording part, that went great. Not necessarily the editing part, although that was kind of what caused the issue, but the rendering and the publishing was just a nightmare. We'll get into more specifics later. The long and the short of it was one of my co-hosts had a fan going on in the background, and we used StreamYard to record, and the StreamYard gating was so good that I didn't hear it. So that's a lesson for you podcasters out there. Sometimes the communication program that you're using to record over has compression or gating or whatever to make people sound great. But if they're recording locally, all that finds its way into the recording, unfortunately, because all that processing is not applied to their track. So the track was so distorted. I was I was at a loss. I kept on going through it, and I thought it was my editing program, because in the past I've had issues with Movie Studio and the number of plugins on it, and the intensity of the plugins just were more than what my computer could handle. And I don't have a slouch of a computer. So I thought it was that issue. But at the end, after I did everything and I rendered it into the video and I was double checking the video, I just happened to message Steven. I was like, dude, this is just so bad. And at the same time, I had messaged my co-host. My co-host came back with, yeah, sorry, I had fans going the entire time. I'm like, oh, really? So we had this thought here, because Steven, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month and a half ago, it was sometime in early 2020.
May 3rd, 2020.
So about a month and a half ago, we had done this demonstration of Steven using the live processor on his NVIDIA GTX card, his GTX 1080 card, and its ability to take out that. It's live, it's not processed, but it was some of the best processing that we have heard. So he's like, hey, tell you what, SP, send me the file. I want to run that. I want to check this out. I want to see. So he did. He ran the NVIDIA
RTX
noise.
voiced. It's NVIDIA RTX voice is what it's called, which is basically a noise reduction software. Now, there is a workaround to get it working on your GTX, which is what I did.
Right. So you ran it and then you sent it back to me with a smug face. Although all this took time because you had to record it live when you were actually playing it. You sent it back to me and you said, how do you like that? I'm like, this is a miracle. This is awesome. The problem was I had already completely edited her track in the video, and I had been halfway through editing it on the audio version. So I had to go back and replace all that audio. Fortunately, this particular co-host, it's one of three ladies, I'm not going to say which, didn't have all that many speaking parts during the podcast. So it was rather an easy switch into the video edit, because I did make cuts along the way. And I was able to do that, rendered it, and it was fine. The render took about a couple of hours. Then I went back and did the same thing with the audio. That was fine. We got it out. But it didn't stop there. I also had other issues where, in the process of doing all this, I did two extra things in the video. One is that I had panned my track all the way to the left. So I was...
You're going to talk about this. You should probably not talk about this right now, because aren't you about to
Well,
talk
I
about
wasn't sure. I wasn't sure where you wanted to go.
No, I think just the RTX voice. So
okay.
Because yeah,
So
here, let me go to solo shot, and I think that's
okay.
about all. And then I'm just going to quickly chime in here with something else. So
okay. So I was able to render it and I was able to get it out. And there's a couple more things we'll talk about later, but it was a miracle worker. So glad to have that. It's like what we had been joking about the last few years of having that, debark button for the dog that's barking, or motorcycle revving button. That's what this is like. And it was able to take that fan out, and it was honestly able to save her track. So that is how I saved my podcast, is I sent my file to a professional video editor who was able to manipulate the audio to the point where it was saved. And we were able to do it for no charge whatsoever, other than the internet transmitting the file back and forth, and electricity using to render the files on the computer. So that was awesome. Thank you very much, Stephen. Without that, the podcast would not have sounded as good as it did, which was very important this time around. It was a good podcast, and we got a lot of compliments on it, and it's really thanks to you.
It was fun. It was a fun project. And if you want to hear a little bit more about this, we delved into it a little bit more details about sort of what effects I had to apply afterwards and stuff over in the live episode of Better Podcasting Live Chat, episode 11. So check that out at betterpodcasting.com. We got a little bit more into the nitty gritty over there, but it was fun. And I'm glad you could talk about that. And that's how I saved his podcast. I've been waiting a long time to say that. Let's go ahead and move on. That mute button. One day I'll be used to the mute button. One day. Sometimes you have a really good podcast recording session. Prepping for your show goes excellently. Ideas come to you easily, and in no time you have that document filled up, ready to record. Then you actually get behind the microphone and everything goes really well. You have hardly any delivery issues. Your delivery, in fact, is one of the best that you've seen in a very long time, and it just turns out to be a very straightforward recording session. This means that you end up flying through the editing process. You have hardly any changes to make, and you just realize that as you get to the end of that, this whole thing has just been a cakewalk. And now you get ready to publish, but that's when it all comes crashing down on you because you encounter issues that prevent you or delay you from publishing. And that's what we want to talk about today. Things that are going to delay you from actually publishing your podcast, and of course, some ways that you can combat those issues. SP, why don't you go and kick us off with one of our favorite categories to talk about?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with editing. So I know we just set the whole stage up by having a successful editing session that was part of the whole vignette that Stephen was talking about, but that was just for effect. We'd be remiss if we didn't start with one of the things that caused the biggest delays with publishing, and that's editing troubles. This is because while you can often have a consistent, reliable schedule, there are many, many situations where editing just causes delays. And when those delays happen, they can cause you to have delays to your publishing. First, one of the delays that we're going to talk about is obtaining the file from your co-host. So if you double end record or multi-end record your recording sessions with co-hosts, one thing that can come up is when you can't even properly start on the editing process because you have an issue with the file from your co-hosts. Sometimes they may not have sent it. Yes, I am guilty of that, and co-hosts of mine are guilty of that as well. Other times they may have just sent the wrong one. Again, I am guilty of that. And again, my co-hosts have been guilty of doing the same thing in the past as well. This has even happened here on this very show. Now, one of the ways to help solve this is to ask for the file right away after recording, especially if you're not used to doing that right away. Now, I am used to sending Stephen the file both for Gonna Geek and Better Podcasting right away. There are some very few nights where it doesn't go to as planned. And then it gets to whenever Stephen is actually editing the show and he discovers that the file isn't in the folder. And he's like, SP, did you send the file? And I'm like, I'm sure I did, when I haven't. Or maybe I have and the system just hasn't internalized it. That's happened before as well. But when you get the file, the idea is to preview it right away when you get it. Now, I know we've talked about this on the show before, but I've done Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. where I've not been able to edit the show for a few weeks. Something has gone wrong in one of my co-hosts' recording setups, and I can't tell that until I start editing the show, which could be weeks later. So they don't have a chance to correct it until we've gotten 3, 4, 5 shows down the road. So it's really imperative, whether you edit or not, that you preview that file as soon as you can, right, Stephen?
Yeah, and honestly, I should be better at this. I'll admit that, because sometimes it's just a matter of making sure that it's there and the right length, because I've had this before where I've gone to edit and, I'm a bit of a procrastinator, so it'll be Saturday morning. I'll be like, "Let's edit better podcasting," and I'll look, and something's gone wrong with the transfer between SP and I, and I'll have to be like, "SP, when you get home from doing your very important errands, could you please make time for me?" And often it's the upload service that goes wrong.
And sometimes just have to caveat that for our show here. Sometimes I'm not running errands. At that time, when we first started the show, I was away from the weekend. I was doing like kids sporting events and stuff like that. So I'd have to either talk somebody through using my system at home, which Steven's had to do that in the past too, or we just have to wait until I got home, which meant Steven couldn't start editing the show until later, or he went to his backup to use it. So all sorts of things can go wrong. Some things can go right, like i.e. you have a backup to edit with, but in the end, getting that file right away and previewing it is a way to shortcut this problem as you're going along.
The next editing delay that we want to talk about is that sometimes you might find issues as you preview your file. We're big advocates here of previewing your file once you've edited it, even if it's just on like a 2x speed, just to make sure that it's there. And sometimes as you do this preview, you will hear many issues. This has happened many, many times for me where I thought I got all of the things, but it turns out that I completely glossed over some others. So this, of course, will lead to more editing and re-exporting that file. And then you might preview that again, and then you find more issues that you also missed that first time. This, again, is something that I've encountered quite regularly. And one of the things that I've learned from this is that it's almost better to leave the editing until you're finished previewing that file. And that's kind of what I've started to do, is I create a secondary edit log sort of thing as I go through and I preview the file. So I'm only getting back into the editing one more time, hopefully, in theory, rather than going and doing a little edit, then hitting save, and then continuing, and then saying, oh, you missed this one, you got to resave again. So that's one of the ways that I've kind of tried to curb some time here.
It's interesting that you point that out, because I kind of inherently do that. I don't preview the file, but I render the audio file so that I have the actual final audio in the video edit that I'm going through, so I don't miss anything as it's going along the way. That's interesting that you say you're previewing it, because it's kind of doing the same thing a little bit differently. You're actually listening to the file, and then I'm actually processing the file, then we're going through it a second time. So I didn't know that. That's interesting that you're creating a second edit log. Perhaps, though, you have an issue during that second edit pass that causes you to break the file that you're saving. For example, you accidentally mute one of the tracks. I've done this before. This has happened last week, and it's by accident. What happens is I'm editing the show, and as I'm quickly moving the mouse across the screen, it just happens to touch and drag that slider that's on the left-hand side of that track. That is the pan or the volume, and that'll go back and forth. Every once in a while, I'll forget and I'll mute a track by mistake as I'm doing the final edit cuts, and I will render it, and so the track will be muted. Well, that didn't happen this past week. It's happened before. What happened this past week is I dragged the pan on my track all the way over to the left in Movie Studio, and I published the file, or I rendered the file. And thank goodness I looked at what I will do when I render a video file is I will look at both the audio and the video preview. So I'll look at the audio track. It will be a simple look to see if everything's rendered correctly, if it's all the same levels, or if it's missing sections of it. In this particular case, it's a stereo file that's rendered for the video, and the left track, whenever I was speaking, was like minimal. It wasn't even exist. I knew exactly what it was when I was looking at it because I've done it before, but that just meant I had to go back. I had to fix the actual pan on my track, and I had to re-render. And you know how long it takes me to render a 1 hour 4K video file with audio processing on it?
10 minutes.
2 hours.
Oh, that's not 10 minutes.
2 hours. I don't have a slouch of a computer. It's not exactly state of the art. It's 4 years old right now. It's got an i7 5th generation processor in it. It's got a 1060 GTX video card in it. So it's not like the bottom of the line 10-year-old laptop. and it's still taking me 2 hours to render this 4K video. That is time that it takes away from publishing, right? Now, the other thing that I mentioned is the volume. Changing the volume either way can really be an issue. It can either distort the audio or it could make it non-existent. Now, I actually do a compression on the final edit. So if it's clipping, I won't know unless I actually listen to it, which is why I preview the video. I preview the video to make sure that the video elements are working, and I preview the video to make sure that the audio is okay and in sync as I'm going along. Sometimes I just don't catch it until that final, but hopefully the key is to catch one of these before I publish. Are we?
I think but wait, there's more.
Yeah. Okay. But wait, there's more. At some point when I was fixing these 2-inch shoes, I inadvertently deleted like a section of some of the tracks near the beginning, not the beginning, but near the beginning of the file. So I edited it and I rendered it, and I didn't even look at the audio yet. I was just skipping forward on a 30-second skip forward, and all of a sudden I didn't see anything. It was a black screen. I'm like, oh, that's just the file didn't load correctly. So I shut it down and loaded it back up. No, in my video player, no, it's black. And wait, there's a whole section where nobody's saying so. So I went back to the original file and I saw the fact that the files were gone. Now, you normally would just be able to do an undo, but I had done other things after that had happened. So I actually had to go back, and in Movie Studio, it's really neat. You have the original file, you create another track, you have the original file, you pull that original file down, and then you clip sections and you throw that in the actual track that you're editing, whether it's the video or the audio. So it's kind of easy to do, but it's just a pain, especially because I didn't know which tracks or which segments in those tracks were taken from. So I had to preview the first 10 minutes of that several times, make sure everything looked right. Then I had to do a re-render of 2 hours, and then I had to upload it, which takes a while when you're talking about a 10 gigabyte video file. So it takes time, which can then, if I was on a publishing schedule, it would delay publishing. Honestly, if it hadn't happened this past weekend, all these delays might have taken 2, 3, 4 days, but I was able to get it out roughly in the same time frame as I was normally going to publish. But it was only because Stephen was there to save my bacon, and it was because I had the time to sit and re-render these files. Now, when you're re-rendering these files, you cannot use that editing program either, whether it's video or audio that you're rendering on. So you have to take that in time into account too, in case you wanted to do something else with the audio before you published.
I actually coincidentally had a similar issue this past week where when I was doing this show, I, on my second pass, accidentally muted the intro because I was trying to finesse a little bit of audio timing between you and I. So I muted my layer for the intro music, and then I saved it, and I was like, oh, what did you do? I forgot to unmute it. So it was, it stopped me from being able to publish on the time that I had wanted to.
How did you determine that you had muted it after you had rendered the file? Did you preview it?
I went and I opened it up, and it was like, oh, look, there's no audio.
So you opened it up in audio editing program, or
no, just in like a Windows Media Player.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were listening. You weren't.
Yeah, I was listening, and there was no audio, and then I went back and I looked. So.
All right.
But as you might guess by today's title, there are actually many things that can happen after editing. This is what we're going to call for as during the actual publishing process. This is when you have the file ready to go and you can't actually get it posted. And the first thing we want to talk about in this sort of section is uploading the wrong file. If you podcast regularly, it can be really easy to accidentally upload the wrong file to your media host, especially because browsers often remember the last time that you used that file upload window, and it'll bring you back to that. And if you don't do a lot of file uploading, it might bring you back to the previous week's episode. Or if you do multiple podcasts, it might bring you to that last podcast that you did. And I've done this before. And one of the ways that I have actually tried to combat this is by embracing the drag feature. I don't know if you've seen this, but over the last like 5 to 10 years, a lot of websites now make it so that you can simply just drag a file from your file menu into the actual upload web page. And as an old school techie, I have to say, it's hard for me. I love that file upload window, that little file navigation browsing window. That's what comes natural to me. But I've started to embrace this drag and drop because when I edit, often I have that window open for the episode that I'm working at because I have files that I need to pull into my editor and things like that. So having that open, my odds are increased because it's very unlikely that I have opened the window from a week before.
I've done that before too, especially when I was publishing 3 or maybe 4 shows a week. There was a time that I was doing that, and I tried to get it all done during the weekend pretty much. It was back in the day when I had Voices of Defiance, Starling Tribune, and Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. all running concurrently, and Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. Longbox as well back then in those days. And I would inadvertently do the upload, and then the next upload window would come and it would be in the same file or folder that you were talking about before, and I would just upload the latest in there, and then I would fill in all the proper ish things in there. Or there have been times where I've just actually published the entire wrong episode in the entire feed. But yes, I've done it before, and you just got to have attention to detail and double check before you hit publish that everything is right. I have turned myself to the dark side of double checking everything and reading every line as I go through. And actually in Libsyn, there's multiple tabs that you go through before you publish. I actually go through each of the tabs, even the tabs that I don't use every time, just to make sure I don't have something in there that will make everything not go as planned. So yes, I have done this too. Steven's not the only one that's done this. And it doesn't have to be that you're doing multiple shows. It's just that when you're doing multiple shows, there's more of a likelihood for it. But you can just be doing one show and then upload the entire wrong file. Say it's your birthday celebration that you have recorded, and you're uploading that instead of the podcast episode.
Now, the next one that we want to talk about is if you find that there has been a change in the interface for your publishing tool. Now, this might be your media host. This might be if you use WordPress to generate your RSS feed, or maybe if you do video, it's something like YouTube. Yes, if this interface changes, it can slow you down and delay your publishing. This is because you're now going through something that you're not familiar with. And eventually you will pick up speed again as you get familiar with that interface, but it will definitely drag you down. This has recently happened to many people on YouTube. For a long time, YouTube has been trying to get you to use their new creator upload tool, and it's quite different than the old one. And for those of us that drag our heels and kept clicking the use classic, well, we may have gotten cut off recently, and I am one of those people where I was cut off and it said you have to use the new tool, and now I feel like it's the first time I've used the YouTube uploader ever because it is so different. I'm getting better as the weeks go by, but it still is a moment for me to really grow, or it really is something that I still need to get more efficient at, and it's slowing me down, and I definitely cannot do it as fast as I used to be able to.
One of the things that I've noticed with the new tool, and I started using it right away when it came out, and I complained about it left, right, and backwards to Steven, a couple other guys that we talk about this stuff too. And the problem is there's no way, if you have a longer show that takes a while to upload, there is no way to direct publish. You actually have to let it upload before you can go back and fill in all of the fields in order to actually publish it correctly. So if I have one issue with it, it is that issue is that there is no way to fill out all of those fields until after you've uploaded this 10, 15, 20 gigabyte show, which takes a while, even if you do have lightning fast internet. I mean, Steven, how long does it take you to upload an episode of Better Podcasting?
Couple minutes. I have 350 megabits per second upload, but I am the exception. I get that. Okay. And there's also people listening right now that goes, you only have 350, Steven? I know there's lots of people who are saying I got a lot more.
people will say that I live in some third world country. I only have 20 upload, I think, and it takes me an hour and a half to upload a show of Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. Anyway, the last area within the publishing section that we want to talk about has quite a few examples. This is what we're calling encountering technical issues during the publishing process. The first that we're going to talk about is the media host outage or slowdown thereof. Once in a while, you'll see an issue pop up where the hosting provider you're using becomes slow to use when you're trying to publish, or perhaps there's just an entire outage. It does happen from time to time. This sometimes is on their end, sometimes it's on yours. The internet can seem magical sometimes on where the issue actually lies. For example, Stephen often publishes late at night on a Sunday evening. One issue he's seen semi-regularly is that it'll take a long time for the file to upload to the server. Unsure of the reason? Could be when maintenance is happening. It could be when the island is shut down for whatever reason. I don't know. They're actually checking each bit as it's going back and forth across the cables that run across the ocean floor.
What it is there's only half the amount of beavers transporting the packets. That's what it is.
I see. They get a little Sunday evening break. Got it. But this causes a delay in getting the process moved along. Now, how he deals with it is he plans to bounce around in the different areas of the publishing process. For example, he'll start the upload of the file, then he'll open another tab with the betterpodcasting.com site to get that post ready. So while he's waiting for that to upload slowly, he can then multitask and do something else. This actually extends to promoting where the show is distributed to. There's no telling sometimes how long it takes a destination to receive the show. Destinations I'm talking about like Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. Oftentimes you'll hear somebody uploading a podcast to Apple Podcasts /iTunes, and 24 hours later, they're like, where's my show? It's not showing until 48 hours later, sometimes 72 hours. Apple Podcasts is one of those destinations. And here is an example. I was reading the Pod News on Wednesday, June 24th, and Pod News is something that James Cridlin puts out every weekday, basically. And on Wednesday, June 24th, he put this in the Pod News. Spotify stopped ingesting new podcast episodes for a while yesterday. Delays of over 5 hours were seen for some new episodes. Spotify told Pod News, we can confirm, quote, we can confirm that we have experienced an ingestion issue this morning, resulting in some delays in certain podcast episodes being uploaded to the service. The issue has been addressed, and we expect to have everything back to normal shortly, unquote. Now, sometimes, as I said, it can take a day or two to appear in a podcast directory or destination. And when it does, it's actually difficult to promote that destination, that location, when the episode isn't there yet. So that is part of what I would determine the publication process. And if you can't actually get the episode link in those destinations, you can't go ahead and promote it. So it is a delay that you run into.
Now, the next one that we want to talk about is all about losing work. Sometimes you'll be in the process of preparing the post for your podcast, and something happens and you lose all of that hard work that you did. This could be a system technical issue, or it could just be a human technical issue, such as accidentally closing the tab. This is something that I have done many times because I have many times accidentally closed the wrong tab on my browser. One of the best ways to help avoid losing this information is to use the fave feature. Use the fave feature.
Mm-hmm.
Use the fave feature.
Oh, happy Canada Day, buddy.
One of the best ways that you can avoid this is to use the save feature regularly, even if it's just part way through there. Maybe get a big block of information in, then you can hit save. It's a lot better to go back to an earlier version and lose a little bit of work than go back to the 0 version where you have nothing and lose all of your work.
Save early, save often. Another thing that can happen is you encounter another site error during the process. Now, sometimes this is a technical issue that you encounter. For example, this site just might give off an error. This is something that we see from time to time with Libsyn. And Stephen, I believe you had that very thing happen this week when you were publishing Better Podcasting, where you hit publish and you just got a site error.
Yeah, it was weird. I hit publish. It was all ready to go. And then there was a site error and my post was gone.
One way that I get around that from a backup standpoint is I create my show notes and everything that I need to for the episode in another program and then import that over. But you would think in this day and age that you could go ahead and just treat the web page as in whatever. I'm not singling out one company, but the web page as having drafts, but it just doesn't happen all the time. Or maybe it's a matter of something that odd crops up that requires more work. For example, the other week, we actually had Libsyn double up a Better Podcasting post. And I believe we talked about it before where you actually ended up having to publish the episode 3 times before it actually went out.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just weird that it happened. I've never had that happen before in any of my shows that I can think of, but I might have either been sleep deprived or I don't know, maybe drunk at the time. I don't know. Which is impossible because I don't really drink. But this meant more work had to go in and sort out what needed to be deleted and what needed to be fixed. And it delayed the whole publication process. I mean, this is very frustrating because you've already recorded the episode, you've edited the episode, and this publishing process. We talked about how long it takes before, about depending on what you do, an hour, 2 hours, at least a half an hour. And it's just very frustrating because you just want to be done with it at that point and get it out for other people to enjoy. So there's other things that we want to talk about that delay the publishing process too, right, Stephen?
Sorry, I was writing down an edit point.
Sorry.
Because I thought I was muted when I went mute. Which, by the way, allergies are terrible this year too.
I need to start an allergy diary where I write down what the pollen count is in the area of different substances to find out exactly what I'm allergic to.
Well, allergies, like I never used to have them, and now this year I'm like allergy pills every day, and I keep thinking to myself, oh, I remember when SP used to shave off his beard all the time for allergies, and he still does, but maybe I should, but I'm not going to.
You can try it, baby face.
The other things that we want to talk about right now are really variables that we've encountered over the years that have just caused us delays that aren't really anything to do with publishing. They're really just things that are kind of out of our control. And the first one we want to hit on is power failures. I see a lot of these in my neck of the woods in the middle of winter. Yes, I have had to delay publishing a Better Podcasting due to power failure. I think it's happened a couple times, actually. This could be losing power during a critical process of your editing workflow. Maybe you plan to edit on Sundays and get it out Sunday evening, and you lose power in the middle of the day, so you can't edit. Thus, it's going to delay your release time. Or maybe you get a power failure when you're actually going to upload. I've definitely encountered both of these things before, and I've had it where the power outage has ended up causing me to have to just wait to delay till the next day. So what I always try to do is, with the wonderful world of cell phones, maximize my efficiency. If I got some battery juice, go through and start typing out some notes on my phone or whatever, and really try to have things ready so it's a more copy-paste process once the power comes back on. There are other ways that you can sort of handle this sort of thing depending on the tools that you have, but that might fall better into the next one that SP is going to talk about, which is internet outages.
Along the same line as power outages, you're going to have internet outages affect you as well. If this happens, there's a couple of ways you can handle it. You can wait for it to come back and continue as normal. You can see if you can find an alternative way to upload, such as tethering to your mobile phone. I've actually done this a few times. I've done this when I've been traveling for work and the internet from the hotel doesn't work. And I've definitely done this at my family's lake home in Wisconsin. There's times where the internet goes out. There's times when the internet just isn't working. There's times where the power and the internet go out. So yes, I've done this before and it's actually worked. I get the fact that this might not work if the power goes off and you have horrible mobile reception all simultaneously. I get that in those cases, you could probably drive to your local internet hotspot, maybe at Starbucks or something that they do have power and internet. And I know in some storm damage areas, you're not going to have that. And quite honestly, if you're in a storm damage area, you should not be worrying about your podcast. You should be worrying about either fixing your damage to your own home or helping those around you. But you could also use the extra time to take another pass at editing the show to make it even better, and maybe put some background music in if you happen to have it on your laptop that you're working from, or maybe just make it a little bit better, take out ums or something like that. So you can do that. Another thing that's happened to both of us, and this is probably about the most difficult one to deal with, in my opinion. It's family emergencies. And this is very frustrating, but Stephen, maybe you should take this, because it's just something that is, you gotta work through it. And maybe you actually need to set a plan in advance for dealing with events like this.
Yeah, because family emergencies are a little different. A lot of the things we've talked about today, it's really easy to get frustrated with. You know, you go to upload a file and something goes wrong with your host and you lose all your work. It's easy to be frustrated on them. Why did the system break on me? But family emergencies, you really should not be getting frustrated with family emergencies in regard to your podcast. We are big proponents here. Personal life and family comes first. And if you find that you're getting frustrated with a family emergency in regard to your podcast, then perhaps you need to sort of look at your priorities and realize that your audience doesn't matter compared to your family. We're big proponents of that. And I know that's hard to say, but we are hobbyists, so we say family comes first. And in this moment, that means that your family is far more important than your audience. So don't let it frustrate you in that regard, but it can cause delays. Now, like SP said, this is something that maybe you can have a little bit of a plan for, or have some people to lean on when this comes up. We've both had this happen, and I think we've both kind of taken the same approach where we've just accepted episodes not getting out. Gets out when it gets out, too bad. And we ask the people that we know to at least get the word out, because we're both pretty hands-on people when it comes to editing. So we don't really have anybody to lean on, generally speaking, to actually get the edit done. But we can get people together to get that word out and say, hey, there's been a personal issue that has come up. This will be delayed. And I have to say, everybody that I've podcast with when I've had these situations have been phenomenal for that. And SP is one of the ones that has had to step in and go, hey, everybody, no episode. We'll get it out eventually.
And perhaps this is one of the reasons you might want to have a backup editor on hand, somebody that you don't use, but you trust enough to edit your show in a certain way, because if it's a family emergency that is going to take you out of it for a couple of weeks, and the episode is not that important to get out, but it makes sense to get out in a semi-timely manner, you can send it to that secondary editor. It could even be somebody like a professional podcast editor. You can set that up beforehand and just have them on board for emergencies. There are people that do that. I know it's not preferred, because most podcast editors would want to be involved in your process on a show-to-show basis, but this is just something to have in your back pocket. We can talk about it at another time, using an editor that is not you to get your show out. We're hobbyists. We like to do our own shows, but there comes a time where you need to send that file over to somebody else. And actually, we've both edited each other's shows at some point in time, so we kind of have a backup editor, but generally we don't like to use that. Anyway, the next and perhaps final one that I want to talk about here is falling asleep. This will happen from time to time. You might have had an exhausting day. Maybe you've been out working in the yard all day in massive heat. Maybe you don't feel all that well, and you just sat down in that easy chair in your living room just to take a load off for a few minutes. You might have not have even turned the television on, and you wake up and hours have passed by and it's late at night. Yeah, you could get up and go publish your show, but do you really want to do that work when you're half asleep and maybe you need more sleep so you could go to work the next day, you're probably going to regret it. But if this is happening often for you, you should consider revising your schedule to make yourself less exhausted. We've said it before and we'll say it again. Podcasting is stressful at times and it's not for everyone. But if you're falling asleep and you can't get your show out in time, this could be an indication that you might have too much on your plate. This will probably be a topic for a future show. But when I ended Starling Tribune earlier this year, that helped my work-life balance quite a bit. It actually took a lot of time, a lot of off work time that I had, and I was able to distribute that a little bit better. And I was able to connect better on social media and my existing shows that were left. I was able to go back and clean up and organize the infrastructure of the shows behind that were sorely needed to have some work done on it. And I was able to take care of some nagging home projects. And bottom line, as a hobby podcaster, falling asleep and not publishing on time, that can be a symptom of having an overflowing plate. And if that's happening, you should take some time to evaluate how to balance the time you have and what is most important to you. No, we've done episodes on this on the past, but just putting a foot stomp moment at this point. If you are routinely not publishing your show because you're falling asleep or you have other things going on, you'll need to evaluate the available time that you have.
So in addition to some of the suggestions that we've talked about already, we have a few others that we just want to quickly touch on some ways that you can help curb some of these issues. First, allow for time for some minor delays in things like file transfers, and of course, back up those files regularly. Make sure that you use good quality monitoring speakers or headphones to reduce missing the issues during your first editing pass. If you have a real heavy section that you do have to edit, though, maybe take some time to go back and play that all together so that you can see if you did have success with that editing. That'll save you having to hopefully make a second pass on there. Make sure you double check your work. In home projects, there's an old adage, measure twice, cut once. In podcasting, you could use the adage, pre-check everything twice, render once. SP made that up. I'll give him credit there. Something like that.
There's got to be a good saying in there somewhere. Not the one that I came up with, but something like that. If anyone in our audience has a better adage than pre-check everything twice, render once, we'll gladly take it, run with it, and give you all the credit for it.
Make sure you also double check the file. Did everything render properly? And did you upload the right file? Give some time for upload errors and outages. Assume that whatever you are using will break on you. And this is SP's favorite advice, which is go on a diet and take a little off of your plate. Well, your pod plate, okay? You know what we see? It's a metaphor there. Now, also acknowledge that emergencies do happen and accept the fact that they do happen, and emergencies are more important than your podcast in that moment.
If you podcast long enough, odds are that you will run into a publishing delay of some sort. But with enough prevention and preparation, these delays hopefully won't affect your show too much. We've discussed a lot of the ways that we've run into with publication delays, how we've handled them, and what we would recommend to do to prevent them. Hopefully, this has been helpful to you. But if you have run into a publishing delay that we didn't cover, and you have an idea of how to prevent it, we'd love to hear about it. You can email us, podcast@betterpodcasting.com. You can send us a text email, but we really would prefer a video file. If you can't do that, an audio file, because we would love to share it with everybody else so that they can make their podcast better too.
This is the Better Podcasting Download.
I ran into this news story, and it's kind of ongoing saga from a few years ago. And it's that Scripps, EW Scripps, is exploring the sale of podcast service Stitcher. No announcement has been, at the time of this recording, no announcement has been made. Who knows, by the time this is published, maybe Scripps has sold Stitcher to somebody. This kind of fits within the realm of everything going on. And the fact that Stitcher is kind of taking a back seat to publishing destinations like Pandora and Spotify. And I think if Stitcher, which is a good destination to use, if they can marry themselves up with another media company, whether it's Hulu, Netflix, satellite radio, something like that, that this could actually be a good partnership to have for somebody that's already in the publishing business, so that they have all these podcasts, these hundreds of thousands of podcasts available for their audience to delve into at virtually no cost to them.
I agree. This is, I think, definitely an indication of how things have changed with where people are getting their podcasts. For a while, Stitcher was one that was quite a top contender as far as places someone might go look for a podcast. But I think if you're Stitcher and you're looking at this, you've been around for a very long time. And then Spotify comes in, they swoop in, and they get in, and they have way more success than Stitcher did in a very short time. Kind of can help make you think a little bit about what you want to do. And as the company that owns it, EW Scripts, if that's what they're seeing, do they really want to keep that asset around if they are seeing that it's not delivering in the same way that some other upcomers, I'll call Spotify an upcomer in the world of podcasting, has done? I think it would be really interesting to hear those business conversations that went on behind closed doors and how this all came to be. But the other thing that I think is worth mentioning is, as a lot of people are on Stitcher, you should keep your eyes on this. You should keep your eyes to see what happens with this, because whenever anybody changes, it doesn't matter, whenever any company that you are on changes, you should be aware of what happens during those changes, because if all of a sudden they go in a direction that you're not comfortable supporting, you should find a way to get yourself off of that. And this could happen. People do change terms of service. We've seen services come in and present one thing and then do a little bit of a change, and then people go, hey, wait a minute, that's not what I want. So definitely keep an eye on what's happening with this, because you don't want to be on a service that maybe you're not happy with.
Ironically, Stitcher in the early days of podcasting was one of those services that the terms of service was nebulous, where they meant good things, but they took they had the rights to your entire episode, basically. So they rewrote their terms of service to the point where everybody was happy and they moved on. Another thing is why we're talking about this is Stitcher was kind of the number one destination outside of Apple Podcasts for quite some time. That was because there was no real easy way to get podcasts on the Android devices until some of the other things came along. Some apps started to be like Pocket Cast, started to get a little bit more notoriety. But most importantly, lately with Google Podcasts comes out, that's more inherent within the Android space. So there's that. I did mention at the beginning of the segment that this is an evolving story over the course of a couple of years. EW Scripts bought Stitcher in 2016, and that was an entirely different time in the podcast space than it is today in 2020. I mean, the past 24 months alone have been phenomenal with the change in the podcast space. So I can see why EW Scripts would want to divest themselves of Stitcher now versus when they bought it in 2016. It's just a different space. EW Scripts is not into content distribution the way that other media places are, and it just makes sense to get rid of that business and give it to somebody else. Plus, it would give Stitcher a chance to regain some of the foothold that it's lost through Google Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, and other things as well. Again, I think this would be a good move depending on who gets it. And as a hobby podcaster, I will reiterate everything that Steven says. Make sure you understand everywhere that you're distributing your show to. And if that location gets bought out by somebody else, pay attention to the terms of service, which could change as things go. And if you're just trying to retain ownership of your own intellectual property, this is something that you want to keep your eyes on.
This is where we here at Better Podcasting turn the show over to you as we run through some of your feedback. We call this segment Better Podback.
Things are picking up over on Podchaser there with our reviews, and thanks to everybody who has been reviewing us in a few different places. It's nice to see things outside the Apple ecosystem, says the guy that doesn't own a current Apple Gen device.
That might change. Who knows? We've been talking about your future computing things. So we'll see if an Apple tablet or something is in your future. Anyway, we got another review over on Podchaser a few weeks ago. I want to say a special thank you. And I don't want to butcher your name. And I'm really sorry, but I think it's pronounced Sven. And if it's not, please let me know. Anyway, he said, quote, "This is easily my number one podcast of those I am following at the moment. Solid independent advice is extremely valuable in these days when it seems like the only goal for podcast coaches and hosts is how to find a way to monetize your podcast. Keep going, guys. You're a big inspiration." Unquote. So again, thank you so much. There was a little bit more in that, and we've been talking directly back and forth with Sven about that. But thank you very much for that review. Really appreciate that. If you want to leave us a review over on podchaser.com, we really would appreciate that. Also over on Apple Podcasts, if that's something that you can get to as well. Either way, why? What?
No, I was just comedy. I was just head face.
Okay. So. Over on Apple Podcasts as well, if you can get to it. And we would love to see that. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, the show just wouldn't have happened if I had not gone back and read those messages, and it was valuable to us, and hopefully it's valuable to other people as well. And also, when you write the review, either send us a message or in the review itself, tell us the name of your show. We would definitely like to promote it as we go forward. So thank you very much for that. Once again, Podchaser and Apple Podcasts.
By the way, I think I'm going to start podcasting in my car and then making you chase after me. So then you would be the pod chaser.
Okay, just something really random ran through my head. So New Year's Eve, when I was growing up, there was this show that was on TV, and me and some buddies, we would get together and we would be safe, and they would come over to my house, and my parents would let us come over, and we would have the basement until midnight, and then that was it. But we watched the Steven Spielberg show where it's a guy in a car being chased by a truck, like a gas truck, one of those big 18-wheelers up and down the mountainsides in the Southwest United States. Can't remember the name of the film off the top of my head, but whenever you say car chase, that's what my mind goes to, that Spielberg film.
I like it. We learn a little bit more about SP every day.
Yeah. And you're thinking, why that? Why not Bullet? Or why not any of the other famous car chase scenes out there? I don't know. It's because every New Year's for like 4 or 5 years we did it. Anyway, so we did have a question over on our Twitter account a week ago, and it said, "Do you have a dream podcast production computer build?" We had at Coffee with Sven, which also left us our review. So thank you very much. So that's his podcast, Coffee with Sven. He said, at least 64 gigabytes of RAM, both SSD and a mirrored HD, a high-end processor and NVIDIA graphics card, a separate server running FreeNAS on a 10 gigabyte network is not a bad idea either, and 3 monitors. Already have OK audio monitors. They're Genelec, which are very good monitors, by the way. One can always dream. So that's a nice thing there. If anybody else wants to respond to that and tell us what their dream computer build is, would really appreciate that. That might be a topic we've got banting around for a couple months here, as both Stephen and I have been ramping up into our next gen computers.
We also posted over on Twitter.
The Twitter.
Sorry, writing down the edit point, everybody. We also posted over on Twitter. Well, I'll say SP posted. When is the last time you listened to an older episode, brackets more than 2 months old, and bracket of a podcast? And we got quite a bit of response here and started all off.
Not of a podcast, of your podcast.
Oh, you did say your. Let me do that again. Times 2.
Sorry, I didn't mean to correct you like that. Good. I thought it was actually getting it in.
It's good. We also asked over on Twitter, I'll admit it, SP actually asked this, when is the last time you listened to an older episode, brackets more than 2 episodes old, bracket, of your podcast. And we'll start off with Alex Williams that said, just yesterday, funny enough, I don't usually, but I had to get some information from it for continuity.
At Aurelia Pod said, I'm in the middle of remastering our earliest releases. So every time I start editing again, so last week to be specific. And Damien over at Aurelia Pod, we've been going back and forth on this. There's a reason why he's remastering his earliest releases. That is because his storyline starts with the earlier releases, and he wants to capture as many audience members as he can with a better production value. So that is why he's doing that. We've got a whole episode about that.
What was the name of that Twitter again? At what?
Aurelia
Pod. We also had Gregory say, about 2 weeks ago, I wanted to compare the sound of the first few episodes with how it is now. The episode was also important. I've done that. I've definitely gone back and taken a listen to compare audio, and it's weird. Whenever I pull up an episode that I'm not on, I just think it sounds better.
We also had a response from Miss Christine, who goes by @my name is Purpose. She said, last month, I do it whenever I'm preparing to reshare an episode from the archives. That's great to do, actually, to reshare an older episode. We don't do that enough. We don't do that enough here on Better Pod. I don't do that enough on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't think you do that enough, or we do that enough for Gonna Geek. So resharing old episodes is something that is important to do. But at the same time, I think Miss Christine has the right idea. You have to listen to that episode to get the feel from the episode before you go forward.
If you have anything you'd like to chime in about any of the things we've talked about today, get in touch with us through any of the ways. You can find us over on our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord. Email podcast@betterpodcasting.com. Tweet us at betterpod. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/betterpodcasting, or you can go ahead and in the sky illuminate it with fireworks that spell out your message over of SP's house. That's how you can also do it.
The best way to get me to see that is to make sure it's contained with the GoSat Watch app. And I will make sure that I'm out and able to see that.
Well, this has been a lot of fun here. We do appreciate everybody who checked this out. If you want to check out some other content, check out betterpodcasting.com. We know that this is releasing well after Canada Day and Marca Day. So please, what? No. So we do hope that you,
America Day.
We hope that you did have a very good Marca Day.
Yeah, I hope everybody's had a safe holiday, and I hope everybody's getting ready for a safe fall and are continuing being safe with whatever weather is going on in your area and whatever health things are going on in your area. But keep in touch with us. We really appreciate all the feedback, and we really appreciate all the feedback that you send us that we can share with other people, so audio and video.
So on that note, for episode 229 of Better Podcasting, I'm Stephen John Drew saying Marca.
I'm SP saying Happy Canada Day a couple weeks ago, including my brother-in-law.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen John Drew of Gonna Geek Productions. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.
Yeah, let's go ahead and acknowledge the amazing timing of my mic flag dying. Did you notice that? It died like right at the outro.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to keep the streams going and do the Better Podcasting live chat. So I totally dropped the ball. Anybody that's watching right now anywhere, I meant to preface this whole recording session. Things we're referring to are backwards right now because of the fact that Better Podcasting Q&A is going to be short. It's going to be shorter this week. So we needed to get through the first episode to see how much time that we had, but they will release definitely. This Sunday will be the live chat. The week after will be the Better Podcasting regular. SP, let's actually stop recording and then we'll restart, okay? Just give me a sec. I'll be right back.
Okay. Anybody has questions for me in the chat while Steven is out and about, please let me know. Duel. Yes, Duel. That's what it was. Oh, keep on forgetting the name of that. It comes up like 3 times a year for me, and I cannot remember the name of that stupid movie. I say stupid because it's actually a very good suspenseful movie. That was so good.
I got my red shirt now. I can be a red shirt.
All right, hold on. I'm getting something off my card here. Dennis Weaver.
All right, are you good to hit record again now?
I said, wait a second.
Oh, sorry. I got to
Dennis Weaver. He was having some sort of like heart attack issue during that. I mean, the character was during that whole thing, and he didn't have too many things of dialogue. It was basically him just freaking out the entire time. And I have no idea why that became a New Year's Eve staple for some broadcast station. He was a sheriff on another show. Okay, I'm ready now.
3, 2, 1, record.
Okay. I didn't know how long.
Anybody who is just going and checking this out now, we just finished recording the Better Podcasting regular episode, which will release on Sunday, the what did I say, the 14th of 12th.
You said 12th.
12th, yeah, 12th of July. And then this one that we're about to record, the Better Podcasting live chat, will release this Sunday.
So it's actually the 5th.
The 5th.
Or 5th and 12th, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's do this then. Actually, you know what? Hold on. Just told
Liberty, dude, you have no idea.
What happened?
Before the Gonna Geek show, Chris and I will often say, wait, when Steven goes, are you ready to hit record? And that's actually a callback to JS, but it's for a reason where Steven will just want to go and we're like, well, but we're not set. So yeah, this is long standing. Steven's a little bit impatient when it comes to let's go. Come
on, let's go.
I'm ready.
Just hold your horses.
Really? See, this is what happens. He's all ready to go, and then, oh, nope, I need to change a few things around. You're going to be really mad when you realize,
or feel a little bit bad when you realize that I'm trying to change the pre-roll to be your Gonna Geek pre-roll. Come on, man. All I'm trying to do.
Which one? There's 3 of them. Which one? Actually, there's more than 3 because you and I both have all the old ones, too.
The Gonna Geek show.
Yeah, but what music is behind it?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Well, let's
do the projector for old school reasons.
For old time's sake.
Okay, here we go. Where's my button?
I'm Willie D. Nelson from
That's
All
not
Things
SP.
Good and Nerdy, a pop culture podcast. Part of
Where did I load it? Did I load? I think I must have loaded it to. Anyways, we'll go with that one. Do I? Maybe. Why does it say what? There we go.
I'm SP from the GonnaGeek.com show, a weekly geek news podcast that is part of the GonnaGeek.com network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other amazing geek shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to the 11th Better Podcasting live chat. I'm Stephen Jandrew. It's somewhere in the realm of Canada Day. Happy Canada Day to you. And it's also somewhere in the realm of America.
4th of July or Independence Day. Get it right, buddy. Yep. Congratulations to both countries for being free. I hope everybody is enjoying a safe and healthy weekend.
Definitely different this year, for sure. Definitely different. Not really the festivities going on that you usually have. Like, I'll let people, and we'll talk a little more on this in a little bit. This show here, after today's recording session, after the recording session today, I'll be on holidays for a little bit. I took my time off of podcasting, but only because usually I'd be like, I'm going away for my holidays, but I'm not. I'm doing the staycation thing around Canada Day this year, and I've got loose plans of some things I want to get started on, some things I want to do, some places I need to go, and things like that. But I don't have a schedule, but it's weird. It feels weird this year.
It does. Not everybody is doing what we're doing, the staycation, so to speak. If it wasn't for my parents telling me to stay away, and that's for good health reasons, by the way. It's not because they don't like me or anything. They actually want to see me. They've been trying to think of ways to work around the issues, but we just really haven't found anything that would work for us. But yeah, we are staying at home. I've got things lined up. I've got a fire pit ready to go, and we've got our local fireworks are still on. So we get to see those out of our backyard, our back windows. So that'll be fun. And aside from that, yeah, I will be enjoying taking a couple of days off for podcasting with both Better Podcasting and Get a Gig. It turns out that Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. just falls right around the holiday, and we will not be taking any time off for Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I truthfully didn't look at the airing schedule. I assumed that they were taking a break from release, but they're not, hey?
No, as far as we know, it's every Wednesday now. If they do take next week off, we will take next week off, but I don't think so. I won't know until later tonight when they say when the next episode is.
Hey, so let's start off here talking about a fun little thing that happened this past weekend for you. We'll talk about some other details over on Better Podcasting, episode 229 in the How I Saved My Podcast story. But the summary is that in the latest episode of Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. that you released, you had an issue where one of your co-hosts left fans on by mistake. And
I can't blame her for doing that either. I mean, it's been so hot this summer that I often hear the suffer for your art sort of thing. But if you're recording an hour-long podcast, I can't really say not to do it. However, it'd be nice not to hear them in the recording, right?
Yeah.
So you can actually point the fans in a certain way so it's not going right up the microphone barrel, which is, I think, what happens here. Now, the good news is that StreamYard was a heck of a processing because I did not hear it. I'm wearing my good monitoring earphones and I had good volume from her, and I didn't hear it at all until I got the file that was recorded locally from her. Then that's when the problems happen.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of fan noise in there, and you tried to clean it up with the tools that you had and whatnot. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the problem over there. But I ended up having this idea that I would try doing the RTX voice removal. That's the audio, the noise removal plugin that not plugin, but like tool that NVIDIA created. And there's a demo over on betterpodcasting.com that you can check out where I did a big test, and I thought I would try to run it. And it was not the easiest thing in the world to do, but ultimately it did make the track sound very, very good.
It did. And I will give you all the credit for it because I didn't remember this at all. And I didn't remember that the RTX NVIDIA thing was specifically designed for stuff like this. However, there's a caveat. You can't actually use it as a plugin on your track. You actually have to use it in real time, which is what you did. You actually played it and you were able to ingest it again. So we did lose some quality in the process, I would say, in running it and recording it again. But because it was so bad to begin with, it actually turned out to be one of the best tracks I've had from this particular co-host in a while. So it was eye-opening. It was awesome. And I really appreciate you not only thinking about it, but you offering to spend the time to go ahead and actually use it as a test. And it worked, and it saved the show because without it, her track would have been annoyingly bad.
I'll say it. I think that most of your audience won't notice that she had a problem. It's that good. And there was only 2 spots in the entire track where I was like, oh, I can hear it. Like as she's starting to say something,
as I was listening back to the whole thing later, but that's 2 spots in an hour-long podcast.
And so I wanted to quickly just touch on sort of what I had to do with the step by step, because it was a bit of a process, like you said. And first thing I had to do was go and get his track, and then I had to set it up so that I could play it in real time. So I set my computer to output through what happens is you get a little audio driver, so it's like a virtual sound card sort of thing. So I set my computer to play through the RTX tool, which then that relays to, and I played out USB to my L8 mixer. So then I recorded that on my L8. So essentially was in real time capturing that. I went and I had to mute everything on my computer. I closed all windows to make sure there wasn't like a bing in the middle of it or something like that. So I closed them all. But then when it was done, there was still a little bit of distortion with it. So what I ended up doing, and it brought up some qualities in her voice that you don't usually hear. So I had to run a few plugins afterwards. And so what I ended up having to do was use the iZotope decrackle, because there was a couple spots where, because of the gating, it did make her sound a little bit crackly where it was pulling out that fan, and it worked well. So I ran some iZotope decrackle on it. I ran some DS because her S's seemed particularly sharp after that cleanup, which makes sense because if you think about it, it's removing this lower frequency rumble, this hum. So of course that's going to emphasize the upper tone. And then the other thing that I had to do was run the D-click, because there was a bit of clicking in there, and also the NS1, my noise removal plugin. I found the Waves NS1 worked better with what the output was than the iZotope one that that comes with the RX Elements and Up pack. There wasn't much left, but there was still a little bit of hiss, and I knew it would bug SP. So I tried the two, and iZotope just left a little bit in, and then the NS1. I only ran, I think, 15%, 10%. It was really, really low level that I ran that noise removal plugin, but it cleaned it right up. So if you want to take a look at that, which Legends of the Shield was that?
Legends of Shield episode 337.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to check that out. I was... and I'm gonna say this, and I'm not tooting my own horn.
Ooh,
I'm
sorry. It's Legends of Shield episode 338.
338. Okay, 338. Yeah. And I can say this because I'm not tooting my own horn. I am tooting NVIDIA's horn. It's pretty impressive. Like, it really is. And again, if you want to check out the rest of that shootout, you can at betterpodcasting.com. Scroll down. There's a video section. It's the first one there. But yeah, I just thought I would explain sort of the technical process.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that back in the day we have been advocating for, using dynamic cardioid microphones to get rid of this sort of effect in the recording. While she was using a dynamic cardioid microphone, most of my co-hosts do. There's one, I guess I eliminated one co-host now, but most of my co-hosts use dynamic cardioid or are in a really soundproof room. And this was one of the reasons why. But in this case, since the fan was going right down the barrel of the microphone, it was just impossible not to do that. And I thought about using just the singular track that I had coming in from Restream with all of them combined. But the problem was that crackle that you talked about, it infiltrated into when other people were talking as well. So I didn't want to degrade their tracks. So we had all 4 co-hosts on the show. So I wanted 3 of the tracks to be good, and I was thinking 3 out of 4 wasn't bad, but you want the best audio that you can deliver your audience. And in this case, I do have competition out there, believe it or not, with Marvel Podcasts. So it's good to have good audio quality, so that if somebody gets bugged with poor audio quality and they want good audio quality, when they listen to our show, that they'll know that is good audio quality, and they can depend on that. So that is one of the deciding factors for people, I guess, with the different Marvel podcasts or whatever niche you're in, right?
Before we hop off of this, I just want to throw in one last thing and say that this has changed my mind in a one-off scenario. Like, I have done hotel recording before, and there have been days that I have been sweating a lot, high up on whatever floor hotel. I would definitely, in a one-off scenario, think twice about leaving that AC on now, knowing that this is an option.
Knowing the pain that you'll have to go through afterwards too.
Yeah. So in a one-off scenario, I would definitely consider leaving the AC on a very hot day. One-off, because again, I don't think that this is reasonable every single episode.
So Bangs Naughty Bits in the chat has thrown in a couple of really cheap capture cards. And by capture cards, what I mean is an ability to take video into your computer. And it's a HDMI to USB. So if your computer doesn't have an HDMI input, a lot of computers have HDMI outputs, but if your computer doesn't have an HDMI input, you can actually take a regular camera, throw in the HDMI into this converter, and then attach it to your computer or laptop via a USB, and then ingest the signal there. And you can make any HDMI compatible video camera or mirrorless camera or DSLR camera into a webcam. And that's a great way to do it. Now, the specific one that he has linked there, which is about $18, is 1080, which is great because now you're not taking all of that 4K into your stream, and a lot of streams won't go 4K anyway, but that's extra bandwidth, and that ends up degrading your computer's capability to stream, and the other end's capability to do that. I know not everybody in our audience live streams video, but if you are interested in doing that, this is an excellent way to do it.
Also, in relation to the last thing that we had over on Twitch, we did have Damien say, has nobody created a plugin for that in regard to the sort of RTX thing? I haven't seen anything that mirrors RTX. I have not to say it doesn't exist, but I haven't seen anything that mirrors the RTX tool yet.
Would you run two recordings? One, Liberty Dude in the chat says, would you run two recordings, one raw for post? And you've done this before. You've run a raw recording, and then one using the plugin live or the RTX live to see if you can avoid doing anything in post.
I don't know how you would run it live because it's something that it's. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
So,
if I had a computer that could handle it, that's not a bad idea at all. I could pass it through, but thinking about the scenario where I'm on the road, I probably don't have the equipment to feed it into the computer and then feed it back out. But maybe.
you could do it at home, but yeah, when you're on the road, especially with your laptop, I would not.
No.
I mean,
if I had a good laptop, maybe, but I doubt that I would. I would probably do a test. If I was going to do it, I would start off and do a few minute test and then run it through and see if I feel comfortable with the output, because you just gotta record a few minute section and then play. But it's a good question, Liberty Dude. I don't know.
Let's put it this way. Your laptop is getting to the point where it might be better to connect via your cell phone on video instead of through the laptop.
Yeah, the laptop's garbage.
Something that Haley's been doing on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, the live audio that's coming in is hot garbage, but she records locally, and then I'm able to use that track later, her local track, and I don't get that cell phone condenser room echo and reverb with it like that. So yeah, it is possible. And I haven't talked about that on the show yet either, because Haley just started doing it a few episodes ago. But yeah, she's been doing that. She's been connecting to StreamYard via her cell phone. And that's something else that we need to talk about in a future Better Podcasting, is that StreamYard now has the ability to control the hosting duties via mobile platform, not just on a computer. So that's a big step up for them, even though they're only 720.
Hey, SP.
Hey,
can I just say to you, I heart you.
I see what you did there.
I'm pushing your buttons.
You did. Okay. So what Steven's talking about is iHeartRadio, and I recently took a very short car trip. It wasn't like very short. It was like an hour and a half. I went to the local IKEA with my daughter, who is moving out for college. She's moving into an apartment, not the dorms. So we were looking at getting some cheap, or she was looking at getting some cheap furniture. So we wanted to see what it looked like, what the availability was, how big were the boxes in terms of trucking them around, that sort of thing. So we went down to IKEA. We're in the process of going down to IKEA. Now, when I'm traveling in the car, I normally listen to podcasts. When I'm traveling in the car with anybody else, they listen to the radio. Kind of bugs me, but okay. So we're listening to the radio, and I'm in this hour and a half drive, I must have heard easily 30 to 40, in one way, by the way, 30 to 40 iHeartRadio commercials and specifically podcasts on iHeartRadio. And that wasn't so bad because iHeartRadio is one of the places where it was an early adopter to have podcasts inclusive of their app. And now they're taking it to the next level. Here's the problem. They kept saying they were the number one place for podcasts. No, iHeartRadio, you're not. I know what the number one place for podcasts is. Right now, it's still Apple Podcasts, but iHeartRadio is not even number two. Number two is Spotify. I know this because of all the statistics that we hear about in the podcasting space from just about everyone. So this whole thing about iHeartRadio having their first ever produced awards ceremony, this whole thing about iHeartRadio being number one. No, you're lying out of your teeth, iHeartRadio. And I just need somebody to come along, slap them upside the side of their head and say, no, you're wrong. Stop saying that because it isn't true.
So if they can say that, can we say we're the number one podcast about podcasting? It's not true. Not
I
true.
mean, it's not true. We could, but I mean, we could say we're the number one hobby podcast about podcasts out there because nobody else is doing it from what I understand. But no, and my integrity wouldn't let me do that either. But
hold on. We're the number one We're the number one podcast about podcasting with host name SP and SJ. Let's do that under our breath every time.
But that's not what the radio ad says. There's no like quick disclaimer at the end or anything. They just said, we're the number one podcast place. No, you're not.
And yes, weren't they the ones that had some statistics questions from, what's the name of that other company? Not Blueberry, the other stats company.
Oh,
I think, weren't they the ones in hot water over that because they were doing the preload?
Yes.
I was
think.
That them?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was them. I could be wrong. But I don't know. It's interesting to see how these companies are trying to state that. I think there was some questions about Spotify a little while ago that we talked about that, there's one way you could argue they were right, but there's many ways you could argue they were probably incorrect. So I'm just interested to see these companies try to flag the number one podcast banner. It's cool because that means that podcasting is so relevant that they want to try to fly that flag.
So it was really funny in the car. We're hearing this and my daughter who was driving looked over to me and it's like, Dad, why are you getting mad? I go, they're not the number one. She's like, how do you know? I'm like, I am on iHeartRadio. And she's like, you are? Yes, I am. So yeah, we went through that whole thing.
Liberty Dude saved us. He goes, you're my number one. So yes, you can say
we're
that.
Liberty Dude's number one podcast about podcasting.
The number one podcast about podcasting for Liberty Dude. Okay, so let's talk about mics. Let's talk about mics for a second. Before we get to another question we had, because we had the wonderful Cody Goff message us today, and he blamed us.
Who's Cody?
Cody Goff is the renowned, is that the right context? Podcaster.
Award-winning.
He is the award-winning Discovery podcast personality, which is all 100% true.
Knows Micro personally.
I don't know if that's true, but he
well, come on, go with it. We just talked about iHeartRadio.
All right, fair enough. He has been on the show before, and he reached out to us saying that we were responsible for there being no availability for the microphones we always recommend, which is the Audio-Technica AT2005, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100, and the Samson Q2U. Well, actually, he didn't mention the Samson Q2U. He just mentioned the first two, to which I said, hey, yes, we've been saying for a while that there is a big microphone shortage. There has been since the beginning of COVID. There's definitely a shortage right now. And so I said, have you checked the Samson Q2U? To which there wasn't much that was said. But I did a quick Google, And allegedly I found one. Now, I'm not going to say where I found it yet because I don't want to burn him in case.
Yeah, right.
So
he needs a couple of days.
In case a couple of days, but message me around July 4th and if maybe 3rd, and if you want, I'll go ahead. This will be released after, so if you're listening to this on the posted version, message me and I'll tell you where I saw it. Might be gone by then, but
a couple of people in the chat has said B&H has it in stock, or at least a version of it in stock. So thank you, Bangs and Ali Run. That actually is not the place that we're talking about.
Yeah, which is cool. So I will still leave the place that he allegedly ordered it from, but I will also pass that along. But yeah, there's definitely a microphone shortage right now for sure. And if you find one and you've been thinking about it for a while and you see stock, I would suggest you order it, because if we look at webcams, there's no end in sight for the webcam shortage, it seems. So if you get lucky and you've been on the fence at all about getting one of these three, I would say pull the trigger. It's if you happen to find one in stock.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, in the process of this whole thing, I went and looked back because I remembered that there were some high-end broadcast style microphones, dynamic microphones that were USB that were in the system. And I remember the Samsung Q9U that was supposed to be coming out this year. And unfortunately, I think because of the pandemic and logistics shortages and stuff like that, that I don't think we're going to see that we might not see it for the holiday buying season, which I think would be bad for Samsung, because I think that would be an incredible competitor to the Rode PodMic, which you would need an audio interface or a mixer in order for that to work. This would just be USB. Now, I have no idea how it sounds. I know that Bandrew over at Podcastage reviewed another USB. He's actually reviewed a couple of USB dynamic cardioid broadcast style microphones. He hasn't been impressed yet. This is in like the $200 range. Yeah. So we'll see what the Samsung Q9 II actually comes out and sounds like. And I've been interested in it, and we'll see if we can order one even when they come out. You know, we might not be able to. So we'll see.
Got my pod mic still. Got my pod mic.
Mine's in on the table behind me, on the hutch behind me, and that is part of my daughter's studio, although I took it down for the summer. Also, just to back up...
Can we just hold on one sec while you're saying about that? I put my mic back, by the way, on my backdrop, the one I was using for my kids, so it's back.
Yeah. So put away your toys when you're not using them, basically. To back up a second, we were talking about a stats company that we couldn't remember. Ali Run said Chartable, but I don't think that wasn't it.
PodTrack was what I was thinking of.
Yes, PodTrack. Yeah.
There was a chat that Damien asked us over on Twitch. Go ahead and read that out.
Damien said, if money weren't an issue, would you podcast full time? What would being full time change about your shows? I know you guys don't get into the money, but this isn't about money as much as what you would do with being able to do this full time. Interesting question. I've been thinking a lot about this. I'm probably the oldest podcaster, active podcaster on the Get a Geek network, and one of the older podcasters that I know, actually.
He's old.
Yeah, I'm old. And I've been thinking about this. I've been watching a lot of the YouTube sailing channels, and I've been thinking about, well, I still want a podcast, but I could podcast on the boat. So make a cabin into a podcast studio. There's actually a couple of boats out there that have turned their salons into podcast studios. It's not exactly what I'd want to do, but I could do that. So if I could podcast full time, and also I've been thinking about podcasting full time, just not for the money, but just to talk about the stuff that I want to talk about. And if I would get money for it, that would be great. But no, what would change? Well, I would be a lot more interactive with audience. I would bring up the production quality of the show. I would actually do a lot more sound design, or hire out sound design until I could figure out myself. I would I might do one more show, but really what I would want to do would be concentrate on the shows that I already have and make them as good as I can. Because right now, and we talked about it before, my golden rule of hobby podcasting hasn't changed.
Yeah.
A hobby podcaster shouldn't do more than 2 shows. I'm doing 3 shows, so that's still one more than should be out there. And I feel like I'm doing the shows and the audiences a disservice by not being able to put as much time into it, and the time into production, the time into research, the time into interacting with the audience. I'll give you an example. I actually had time this weekend in the midst of the whole Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. debacle as I was waiting for render after render after render. And I actually wrote the script for the Gonna Geek segment, the Space Symposium. This was a week ago. And I wrote it differently than I had been doing it. I wrote it more story style than just going bullet points. I don't know if you noticed that or not, Stephen, as I was going through it.
I did notice actually that it was a little bit different.
And I would like to perfect that. I won't say it was perfect. It wasn't, but I would like to perfect that style. And because I think that people really want to listen to that sort of stuff. They want to listen to a story. They want to be led through information, especially if you're talking about something that was done in 1972. I mean, this is not breaking news like we talk about on the Gonna Geek show or regularly on Better Podcasting or on a week-to-week basis with Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff that I would be doing. I've been monopolizing this, Stephen. What would you do?
Yeah, no, I would. Two things come to mind. Number one, timeliness. I would release episodes quicker for sure. That would be the first thing.
Like same day even.
Yeah, same day, maybe next day. For sure. And the second thing that I would do would be a bigger variety of shows. Now, that's not to say that I'm gonna stack my deck daily or anything like that. No, I might do some seasonal shows. I would definitely do more variety so that I could really explore all the different niches that I like. I don't know what that timetable would look like, but if this was what I was doing full time, I would want to scratch all the different itches that I have so that I can basically not be tempted by the elusive idea that I've got in my mind, because it's really easy to fade with a show because you have a new idea in your mind and you think it's going to be better. So if you've got a schedule where you are doing, like different seasons of shows, then you're keeping yourself well-rounded with the content that you're talking about. And I think that's what I would do.
Interesting question, Damien. Maybe we need to put this out on our Twitter feed and have people respond to it, because I'd love to talk about. Yeah, it's a great question.
All right. We are going to have to do this one a little bit shorter. We got just a couple more things we want to quickly talk about here. First thing that I want to mention before my last thing is I know I said first thing like 3/4 of the way through the show. No. I am looking at a computer upgrade. And maybe by the time this releases, it could very well happen. I don't know. There's a couple things on the deck, and a computer upgrade's probably going to happen for me. I'll save all the boring financial details about that, but I've been torn a little bit between the AMD line and the Intel line. From a gamer perspective, if I was a gamer, I would go with the AMD line for sure. Because the price is better right now, especially with the deals that are available for me. But the big holdout for me is that the Intel line of processors, they still have, you can still get, because now they have one without this, you can still get the integrated graphics, which then comes with the different hardware encoders for things like video, like the H.264 stream. And this is something that I've used before, where I've had my video card encoding for the actual recording that's going to my file. And then in order to balance resources, I've used the chip's hardware encoder, basically the thing that's making the video stream happen, go out for the video broadcast or something like that. I've maximized having that extra encoder in a couple of different occasions. As well, it's nice to know that if all of a sudden I'm in a situation where there's a piece of software that doesn't support the video card that I've got or whatever, I have got that to fall back on. So I'm leaning towards that. I think I'm very close to pulling the trigger. So very well, I may have. So by the time this releases, but I'm very close, very, very close. And this is also because of the fact that I have been having, I've been taxing my system pretty hard for a while, and I got some other projects that I want to do hobby wise and things like that I think it's time to step up. I've had the other one for 5 years.
Yeah, this is something that we talked about before. What is your refresh rate on your computer? I said somewhere between 3 and 5 years, and we're both pushing that 5-year mark with our main machines. And that actually, when I think about it, yeah, we've replaced drives along the
Yeah.
way, but largely they've been solid. And I think we both replaced the graphics cards at some point, but it just comes to a point in time where, especially as podcasters and running your machine as much as you do, like gamers,
Mhm.
their systems don't last that long either because they're constantly using them. We're doing the same thing as podcasters, whether that's streaming, recording, or processing, and they just need to be refreshed. So I've been thinking about it as well. It's just, Stephen, you got there before me. And I have been talking about it with you. I've been talking about it with my son, and this whole AMD versus Intel. It is a discussion. Like a couple of years ago, it was not a discussion.
It was not.
It is a discussion now on which way you want to go.
And my heart says AMD because I grew up an AMD guy. Like that was me. But I think I might regret it. I don't know. I'm like on the fence of pulling the trigger on AMD just because I like to be different sometimes. But the other thing that
I honestly, this is something that I know you want to go with your heart, so to speak, but you really got to look at the technical specifications and see which one will do better for you.
The other thing, just to give some context, it's been almost a year. Like we're within weeks of it being a year since my failure last year. And so when I look at that, like that, I thought I was going to have to upgrade then, but I wasn't. I didn't have.
You were able to patch it.
Yeah.
Just because you were able to find I don't think you could now, by the way.
No.
You should go back and look at those and see if you can buy them now. I don't think you can, because you basically bought the same motherboard and the same processor for pennies, really.
Yeah. And I've got a second box now, so it made my system, I could not tax my system as much.
Right.
Before you go into your Starling Tribune thing, let's just quickly mention this is something that we'll talk more in depth in episode 229 of Better Podcasting, which will come out next week. So the 12th of July. Scripps is possibly selling Stitcher. I think there's some things that people are definitely going to want to keep their eyes out on this. But I think it's just worth mentioning right now in the here and now that this is being talked about because it could change at any time.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's much new. Like
not for hobbyists, no. And listen to next week's episode of our concern about that. The other thing that you put in there, I forgot about this, Simplecast buying Sirius XM. What does that mean for podcast? I honestly or Sirius XM bought Simplecast, I believe, or was it the other way around?
I don't. Sirius XM bought Simplecast. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Simplecast did not buy Sirius XM.
Yeah, I was like, whoa. So honestly, we have a couple of podcasters that have been on the network that have been using Simplecast. We've known people that have been in Simplecast, but then it started to change, and then it started not to get promoted as much. And I was kind of wondering what was going on in Simplecast. Now I kind of know they were positioning themselves as like a startup to be bought out by somebody else. And if satellite radio wants to get into the podcast production side of things, and maybe as a grounds, like a minor leagues grounds or something like that, kind of like what Spotify did with Anchor. And full disclosure, I do not think Spotify knew what they were buying when they bought Anchor and what exactly that they were going to use it for, but I'll put that aside. I think SiriusXM doing the same thing with Simplecast is not a bad idea. And there's so many media hosts out there right now that even if Simplecast went down, you could easily go to somewhere else. And I have nothing bad to say about Simplecast, except for I believe they charge per download, and that's their limit every month. And personally, I don't like that. But if you can get away with it, go for it. That sort of thing. I know several people that have been on there that have used it. So I don't know. That's my thoughts. Steven, you have anything else?
No, I got nothing else to add to that.
Okay. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, especially since we were talking about remastering old episodes and stuff like that, is that Starling Tribune has 5 episodes that were recorded in 2014. 2014, this is 2020. So we're talking 6 years. There's 5 episodes that have never been released. The podcast is ended. The show that the podcast was on is over with. I went ahead and released one of those 5 just for kicks and giggles and editing myself. Now, let me back up a second. I was not in charge of editing these shows in 2014. I didn't take that over until at least 2015, if not 2016. So it's not my fault, first of all. Second of all, I just, why put it out? There's no reason to put it out. Like, nobody's going to go back and listen to these episodes. So why did I go ahead and do it? Well, I spent the time watching the episodes. I spent the time recording the episodes, and it's just personal pride that I want those episodes out. So I'm putting these episodes out. I'm discovering that these were some of the first Zoom H6 recordings that I have, which is awesome. And that I had the Wave recordings back then. I was using different mic, different setup, but I had the Zoom H6. And I have a different hosting skill in 2014 than I have in 2020. It's really interesting in editing myself and my co-hosts like Jay and Wing and Chris, and even Steven was guesting on some of those shows. It's a hoot editing us from back then in 2014, because we're just way different podcasters than we are today. We have better gear than we had in 2014. And it's just using the techniques to edit a show that I do today versus what I was doing in 2014 is just vastly different. So in 6 years, I can see all the improvements, and I'm not even frustrated over what I'm dealing with, because I just want them out. And if somebody ever in the future wants to go through all of our episodes of Starling Tribune from the very first episode, which I had way too much bass on, to the last episode, they can do that. And there are people that do that, by the way. They go back into the podcasts of the shows that they're rewatching, and they listen to the podcast to get, I mean, people do, they binge the podcast episodes just like they binge the actual things. So maybe, I don't know, 20, 100, 2,000 people over the life of the podcast will get to listen to it. I have no idea, but just personal pride. That's all. And I have 4 more to go. It's going to be slow going. First of all, I reduced the plan that Starling Tribune had on Libsyn to the $5 a month plan. So I only have 50 megabits to upload, or megabytes to upload every month. I don't have the 400 or even 150. I just have 50. So I can't release more than one show a month. So it's just going to take a while to get these out. And then after that, there's other ones from season 2 that I might go back and remaster, I guess, kind of what Damien is doing, because there were 2 recordings done on each episode with 2 different crews. So I'll have to find a way to mash that together. But anyway, just want everybody to know that it's not worth it. It's just personal pride.
And also, in the chat, by the way, we did have Bangs Naughty Bits ask any prediction for the Zoom July 2nd event. I don't know.
Interestingly enough, on Instagram today, I saw their G11 that they were. So that was a guitar.
That's a music instrument. That's the music side of things.
So, but they said portable recorder. They didn't say it was like a Zoom H6. They didn't say it was. So that could be it. They could have released it early.
They have a picture. There's a picture that they've teased, and it's black with microphone or XLR cables plugged into it. That's, I think, the July.
So it could be a whole band. Well, I guess that would be the same. Okay.
I think that based off what I think, it's
Aileron pink Zoom H6. Why not?
It's gonna
actually, women would love that. Women would love a white or a pink thing.
I don't think you should say just women. I think that there's lots of people.
Okay,
like,
that is fine. Yeah.
The other thing that I was thinking was that it was going to be a kind of like an enhanced version of what we use the H6, because we use the H6, and I'm trying to think how many XLRs were in that. I'd have to go look. I was trying to find it.
I think they said 8.
I think 8. So we use the Zoom H6 with 6 because we have the capsule on the top that has the thing. Yeah. I think it's going to be probably an all-in-one unit that has a couple extra. So that's what I think. I think it's essentially the next version of that. And I suspect it's going to be black because they did just come out with that Zoom H6 black for God knows what reason. So I think that came out because that's what it's going to look like.
But they came out with the Zoom H4n Pro about a year ago, and that's not black.
I think it was a lot longer than that. The Pro came out.
All right.
Yeah. So I could.
Well, if they want to transition their brand to black, that's up to them. So that would distinguish them.
because I wondered why they were doing the Zoom H6 Black. It was just like, it was a little more expensive. There was no feature enhancement. It was just a paint job. So it would make sense if they had new product coming in. This is kind of their new line, and it'll signify the new line so you can easily see it. I don't know. We'll find out. By the time this releases, we'll know.
Yeah.
And the last
We
thing
will.
that I'm going to mention right now is that after this recording session, after the recording session today, I'm taking a week off of podcasting, and I've arranged things as such. We're pre-recording Better Podcasting proper, and I'm just doing it for me. So I got no plans.
Well, in truth, though, just for full disclosure, we talked about this collectively between you and me and Chris on the Gonna Geek show. We actually decided together, and we all said what our preferences were. But if we said we were going to go on Monday, I think you said Chris and I could go without you on
it's true.
Monday.
I did.
But we were talking about what we were going to do for Better Podcasting. And I just said, nope, let's just take the time off. Just like we do around the holidays time frame later in the year. I was like, no, the way this year has gone, we need to take a week off. So we are taking a week off.
And I think it's important. I just didn't want to speak for you. That's why I was saying I a lot. I didn't want to speak for you, but
I think I was the one who made the final decision. I'm like, no, let's take the week off.
So give yourself time. Make sure you always give yourself some time to relax and recharge. But that's going to take us to the end of this Better Podcasting live chat. You should check out betterpodcasting.com. We got lots of great content there. That's betterpodcasting.com. We will add some more content there over the next little while. I might try to see if I can do something between my time off. Not make any commitments. Just because I'm not scheduling something doesn't mean that I won't do something. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and just want to thank everybody that was in the live chat tonight. We had Bang's Naughty Bits, we had Liberty Dude, we have Overwatcher, we had Alley we had just a bunch of other folks. I'm scrolling right
Suncast.
now.
Did you say Suncast?
Suncast, yep, Suncast is
Had
there.
Damien the DM over on Twitch.
Yep, I forgot about Twitch too. So yeah, thanks to everybody that is listening live or watching live. We really appreciate it. And we will be back in 2 weeks to do this again.
And if you want to check out when that is, because this is, of course, weird with the release schedule, because again, there's days in between because I'm not doing this full time. Go to betterpodcasting.com, click on events at the top. And as it currently stands, the next live stream will indeed be on July 14th. So for episode number 11 of Better Podcasting Live Chat, I'm Stephen John Drew saying happy insert day here.
Hope everybody's safe, and we will see everybody in a couple weeks. Bye.
I stole that joke from the live chat, I'll admit it. Bye.
Good that you sourced it.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at gonnageeknetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen John Drew of Gonna Geek Productions. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.
All right, bye, everybody. We're going to disconnect here. Have yourself a wonderful time, and we will see you on whatever next live show you watch of ours.
Okay, bye.
Bye.